There's 3 tiers of art. There's high art, there's pop art, and then there's low art.
Right.
And then there's Forces of Good and Evil.
Yeah, that is way down there. Hey, everybody. Darn it, where's the thing of me? We're back. We're back. It's Wednesday. My dudes. It's another episode of the Mattriarchy, and we 5 are here today on this beautiful Wednesday to share my favorite robot comic, which may or may not be an accurate title, but it's part of a series. Hey, did you know you can go to the Matt D. Reese YouTube channel and click on playlists, and you can watch every single one of our My Favorite Whatever comics shows in a row. It's there for you guys because I want your time. I mean, because I think that you might find our content valuable. So, how is everybody doing today? I know we're getting a little bit of a late start, but also not.
We're sort of late, yeah.
No, gave me extra time to do more of my homework.
Awesome.
I thought it was my favorite robot, not my favorite robot comic. And I was scanning in an entire history of my characters, and then I found out, just one issue. So
sorry, man.
Misspent.
So no, that's probably my fault.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the way we like to do these, as more like reading groups. We pick a theme, and then we have everybody like read like one issue, and so we all can kind of like have a in-depth-ish discussion about everybody's pick. So it just makes it more so that no one's just listening to someone else talk about a comic they didn't read. Which, is everyone's favorite pastime.
Oh, absolutely. So why don't we go around and everybody tell us, we're going to share whose comic, what they suggested for their favorite robot comic. So let's start with you, Metal. What was your pick?
Well, I went with what to me is a classic, but a lot of even fans of the creator in the States just don't even know about the comic, and it's Dr. Slump, which was Akira Toriyama's comic prior to Dragon Ball, whose main characters are the self-titled Dr. Slump, but kind of stealing the show his side character creation, Arale-chan, who is a android that he made. And then other wacky characters get involved, and it's kind of sitcom-y. It's more sitcom-y than like overall serial story arc, but it's a fun little comic where you follow the antics of this very toony robot girl who breaks the laws of physics and logic like a Looney Tunes character.
I know Raleigh because of the crossover episode they did with Dragon Ball Z Super, I think.
Which they had an older one. There was a TV special that is in the actual episode list on the DVDs in the original Dragon Ball with young Goku.
So I haven't read either of those. So I was just like, we'll get to talk to it, but I wasn't sure who the robot was. But I was busy getting stuff ready for our end of the month at work. So I was just like, we'll talk about it on Wednesday. I'll just read it and we'll figure it out next week.
She's the one who headbutts the moon.
Yeah, wrong, Ms. Chozo. She is not just a female Astro Boy. They're very different, especially in execution.
She's like Astro Boy if Astro Boy had Bugs Bunny powers.
Yeah.
And they specifically, I think, reference that in the Dragon Ball Super crossover at a certain point, because they're just like, she has the ability to just break reality.
Yeah, but she's like, learned my lesson. I'll never fight a gag character again.
Yeah, that one. Except for, I think the only thing that trumped her was Beerus, because it was just like, because he's...
Yeah, and even then, they were kind of playing it fast and loose, but it is pretty sure that a god of destruction should be able to destroy anything from his universe.
Okay, that's like some too deep lore. We got to move.
Sorry. Yeah. We're going to just talk about Dragon Ball Z power levels.
Completely off the radar. And Cartoonicus, what was your pick?
I chose, against all advice, a webcomic from Webtoons called Emmy the Robot, and it is basically, I've come to well, I'm gonna save that twist. But it is what started out as a gag a day comic that kind of spiraled into an overall story eventually about a nanny robot, also known as a nandroid, in a crazy kind of 1960s style world where robots are super advanced, and you can get them on every corner. And all the rich people have these super advanced nandroids that they, top the line quality from a company that is very clearly, or at least the founder of the company is very clearly based off Walt Disney. And it just has this really interesting kind of retro style to it with a cool story that I will get into when we get there, really.
Yeah, I only got up to strip 13, so I'm sure it was just getting going by the time I got there.
Not a problem. Like I said, because everything is strip by strip, it doesn't really matter where you start. You can probably find something that you like about it right away, and eventually just find yourself in the story.
It's very much in line with your tastes, because like I think I hit like the third or fourth strip, and I was like, oh, this is just like a Disney cartoon in a comic book form.
Yes.
I see why Tartunicus likes it, why this was his pick.
After a while, I was definitely telling the artist, like, you need to make this into a DreamWorks movie or something.
So to answer the chat now, what I've got on here, side note, I'm going to distract because it says Dave in the chat is bringing up Weird War #6. He mentioned that in the chat, so I had to look it up, and this is such an amazing cover. I may have to seek out this comic, and we're talking about doing a round 2. This might be my pick for round 2. Who knows? And I do think it looks a lot like Hubert. I don't know if it is, but it does. It definitely looks like Hubert. But it's great looking. Okay, Hutch, what was the book that you picked?
I picked Brave and the Bold 187, which is a crossover of Batman and the Metal Men. And it's a combination of things. First, it's the first exposure for me to the Metal Men when I was 13, 14 when that came out. And I was just getting into comics right around 12. So I'd just been into comics a little bit, but there's a lot of stuff that was still very new to me. And one of them was the Metal Men. And I'd never seen them before. And it was a beautiful cover. It was intriguing. I picked it up later, and it was a wonderful introduction to the Metal Men. And it completes a story arc, and it explains things that had changed in their old book. And it gets the characters married and kills one off, and it's only 17 pages out of the book. There's still a Nemesis backstrip. It's like, I can't believe what they did in 17 pages. It's amazing. And they rehash a whole bunch of the old villains and things like that. So it's a great condensed immersion in the Metal Men.
You know what's interesting is that I didn't know Metal Men even existed until a few years ago. But my introduction was through a comic of Batman Beyond.
Yeah.
So it's like part 1 and part 2 here going on.
I will say condensed is I think you're underselling it a bit. This was I think if it condensed it anymore, it would be it'd be like a diamond.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, sometimes I easily get thrown off by how much stuff old comics could fit when you compare them to like the 3 pages you get nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Okay. So just a little point of reference, right? The first Spider-Man comic, Amazing Fantasy 15, if I recall the numbers right, 15 pages for the origin of Spider-Man.
Yes,
Brian
right.
Michael Bendis spent 8 months on that same story with virtually no additional information.
And most of the information was all on the first page.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy. Larry Bernard has joined us. I think so. This is a comic from whenever he fought World War I. No.
It's when he fought in World War II.
World
You
War
dummy.
I. It's World War II. Second of all, I am not a military material for very many reasons. No, nothing against those that have served. Great respect for doing the job that I am absolutely not cut out for. So I'm only good at getting into fistfights. That's been years since I was in a
That's
decent.
how,
Well,
I mean, isn't that
easiest way to
how,
become
like,
military material is to tell a drill sergeant you're not military material.
I was gonna say, isn't that how they used to like recruit for the military? You'd get into a fist fight, and the sheriff would say, "So you have two options."
Yeah, they probably used to. Larry, I see, has joined us in the chat, and I want to reach out and apologize, Larry. I did not mean to necessarily exclude you from the panel tonight. I was informed just before we went live that you had, in fact, submitted an entry over on Twitter, but I have not been on Twitter since I think Monday, maybe yesterday morning. So I did not see that. So sorry, man. Not trying to not trying to exclude you for any reason. And I am not immortal. I'm just 45. so but yeah. My pick was Uncle Scrooge Adventures number 187, I think it was, which was adapted. The story and it was actually a reprint of one from about 10 years previously. I picked the reprint because it had it was less meaty. The story is that story is the same, but the other one has like, it was one of the Dell versions that has like 5 stories in it. So I got the shorter one, the Whitman reprint. It was 185, and the story was adapted into a DuckTales episode, and that was one of the reasons I got into comics, was from being a fan of DuckTales, and then seeing DuckTales and Uncle Scrooge Adventures reprints in my local grocery store back in the day. So that's a big part of how I got into comics. Yeah,
Can't go wrong with DuckTales.
Yes. So there you go. So that's those are those we're going to look at. And so, who wants to look first, so we can start digging into our comics?
You skipped me, but okay.
Did I? Oh my goodness, I did.
Yes, you did.
I meant to talk about yours right after of Cartoonist's, because
I see how it is.
It's the opposite comic. It's it's the inverse comic of Cartoonicus's. So I was going to make a crack about that, and then I forgot.
Oh, really? Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if it's exactly my favorite, but I wanted to like do something. It is one that has stuck with me. I chose Alex plus Ada, which is this really
weird man.
I would call it somewhat cerebral exploration of post-humanism. But what's really interesting about it is that it looks at a romance essentially between a man and his robot, and the kind of like this exploration of artificial intelligence, humanity, and kind of what happens when we get into that liminal space where the lines blur. Is this just a machine? Is it more than a machine? And I find exploring those questions to be pretty interesting. And this book, I think, does a chunk of that, at least for part of its run. So image book, but yeah,
it's a weird one, man. So anyway.
Well, that's on brand for me. So there we go.
There you go. It is definitely like what it does. It does really well. We'll get into that when we go.
Okay. So right.
So who do you want to talk about first?
Dead air. Okay. Dead air, apparently.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and
draw straws.
No, we should have done that ahead of time. So I'm thinking, why don't we start with the medals and
yeah, we can do that here.
Yeah.
Pull it up.
Well, to be fair, there's no perfect way to start off something about robots than with metal.
That hurt. That hurt
Hear
me
my
deeply.
robotic laughter at your terrible robotic joke. Mechanical humor.
That was actually great.
Yeah, here we go. Unfortunately, they're trying to call me for dinner just as it's time for me to share. I was hoping somebody else was going to go first so I could grab my plate, but I can wait a little bit. This was my pick. I specifically went with Volume 11, Chapter 136 of the whole series, Hello Moon, which I thought was a pretty fun one. All of them are fun, but this one I thought was an especially fun one. It's really hard to pick in an episodic comic like this because everything's just so wild and out there.
Well, and I was so surprised at how short these were.
Well, I mean, it ran in a magazine, so they're only 20 pages.
Right.
Yeah. For each chapter. And basically, this is just the title page. Let me scroll down. It starts off like a cartoon. We got a little singing here and stuff like that. And it turns out there are just everyday life. One of the things I really like about Toriyama is he likes his cartoons. You see that very, very early on, even in Dragon Ball. But then he'll just like randomly do like a style change out of nowhere just to show off with motion, character expression stuff. And that's really
is that
nice.
what that is? Okay.
Yeah. But this does not really follow most of the main cast. It immediately pans over to some of the side characters who needs to go off and handle a little grocery shopping. And then she runs into our actual robots, right? With the main one being Arale here. And they're going off and they're going to go have a time travel adventure, which this other character doesn't actually believe that's possible. So much to her surprise, they end up going back in time, which I love it. He does a time slip. He actually has to physically slip for them to go back in time.
This is a real that reminded me. It was such a. You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of like Calvin and Hobbes, except no, it's not just going to be in the kid's imagination. He literally has a time machine. So
yeah, it's actually happening.
Right.
And they go backwards through time. So like the board that they're on has to literally travel backwards while they're facing the other direction. And they end up in like the era of dinosaurs. And I like this because everything that happens in Dr. Slump is technically canon to Dragon Ball. Everything. And people like, oh, Toriyama forgot. Sometimes he does, but it's more like he stopped feeling like doing something than forgetting. Because this explains why there are dinosaurs running around in Dragon Ball in the modern day. They go back in time, and a giant meteorite was supposed to wipe everything out. But these overpowered Toon Force robots decide, no, we're just going to stop it. And then Arale headbutts it and sends it to orbit. And that also explains why they have at least their first moon, which is complicated if you know. Right? But they even have like the smaller robot's handprints here on the moon. It's like, oh no, there's life on the moon. And they're all look at the moon, how beautiful it is. And it's like, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. And that's basically it. It's a short, sweet little story, cartoony about this android robot and technically her brother because he was made after her, going on a time travel adventure.
So, okay. Because I don't have everybody's name in this thingy here. But which one is the robot? Because I thought the time machine was the robot when
the time machine is also a robot. Yes.
The girl with the glasses at the very bottom there.
Okay.
She's
the fairy boy. Those are both robots.
Yeah.
Okay. In the cat suit and the mouse suit.
Yes, they were made by Dr. Slump, who is this portly guy over here with the mustache.
Okay. Okay.
So what's interesting is that
robots don't look like robots.
Yeah. This is again.
Well, they've got robot insides. So Arale actually has a battery. So one of her kind of like weaknesses, because you still have to give any character a flaw, is that she can do things that burns through the charge of her battery, and it needs to either be replaced or refilled.
Wow.
Edming says he's not going to do a moon joke in honor of me, but some things are just too easy. And I think Fizz said, or was it Dave? Dave said RoboCop versus Terminator deserves an honorable mention. Good point. And then I think Fizz mentioned waiting for somebody to mention Atomic Robo, which I feel ashamed for not picking today because Atomic Robo and Dr. Dinosaur is some of my favorite comics. So great stuff.
So I have a question, because I know in not being familiar with this comic until now, I know in the Dragon Ball universe, like half the characters are aliens usually, right?
No, half the characters are not aliens until like even way later.
Dragon Ball Z is, I think, when things became aliens. I think all throughout Dragon Ball, it was all like demons and, you know, it was more magical essentially. And then later it was like all the things that that you thought were magical or were demons actually came from like another planet.
Okay, but I mean,
I'm
looking at the rounded spaceship in the beginning of this, right? Is anybody here an alien?
No.
Okay.
Nobody in this panel is an alien.
Then I can only assume that there's some strange dialogue. I have to assume is just the case of this originally being written in Japanese and getting an odd translation into English.
So that girl that you saw and her brother working out, the reason they're in a chip is because that's just how they travel, right? They're actually from China, and that's why they have weird speaking patterns.
What?
Yeah, they're from the in-world version of China. So they speak.
So he is doing that on
like
purpose.
like a Chinese person would have an accent. That's just how vehicles look in Dragon Ball.
And I noticed that instead of like detergent, she said, what was it, laundry powder or something?
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that was the case of him purposely doing that for the sake of a foreign understanding, kind of like, because it reminded me of Starfire from Teen Titans, or if that was just a translational thing.
Yeah, so like even at this point, he had already been considered doing an adaptation of Journey to the West for a while. So he was already kind of working some of the Chinese themes and stuff into his stories before he tackled Dragon Ball.
I gotcha. Interesting.
I like let's see here. It's interesting because Toriyama is known for, his, and Dragon Ball definitely has humor in it. I'm not saying it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, especially the earlier on it is. It's
Right.
more humor than action. Yeah.
So the little robot in the mouse costume has wings.
Yes.
So is it a bat costume, not a mouse costume?
Well, I think it's because he has wings.
Oh,
I think they are supposed to be a cat and mouse. Like he looks like a fairy. Like that's just what he looks like. Normally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So he's got antenna too.
Yeah.
But you definitely get to this. You have this interesting situation where you have a creator who's known for his intense battle action scenes, and in this comic, it's pure Looney Tunes. And I would say Calvin and Hobbes in there. There was in this particular story, I was getting some Calvin and Hobbes vibes, but like the ability to headbutt the moon into space is Looney Tunes.
Well, here's the thing. Was not Dragon Ball a whole lot goofier than Dragon Ball Z?
No, it was.
Yeah,
but
there was a lot of. But technically, it's all Dragon Ball. But yeah, we separate the name because the show had a different name when it came over here at that point.
Right. My point being that I would
even the manga was all Dragon Ball until Super.
But this is on another level. This is on another level.
But my point is that I would assume we see his work get more serious as time goes on.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are some weird things that are like still similar to this early on. Like there's a panel where Goku literally gets broken like through the panel. Like he gets hit so hard, or no, he hits the guy so hard that he goes through the panel, like the panel breaks, and that's how he gets into the next panel. So there's a lot of gags like that.
I like that kind of cleverness in comics.
Yeah, and that's just very Toriyama. He always wanted to play around with the form of the comic as well.
Right.
And Dr. Slump is where you really that's his toy box. This was his first real toy box, and he really got to play around with everything, anything he wanted to. If you go back to chapter 125, it's called Superman, right? Suppa.
Yes, I noticed that.
Man, and they have like this mockingly version of Superman who doesn't really do anything. Like he gets beat up or almost beat up by the Chinese guy that you see doing the handstand earlier in this comic, which I can scroll back up to him, like because he was like showing off how strong I am. You do not want to fight me, and then like he barely bent a can or something, and then the Chinese guy just like breaks a tree by hugging it. So he runs off, and then he runs into Arale and stuff. So it's just like that kind of where is it? I passed him. This guy. There's that type of gag stuff. Like the whole thing was just about having fun.
You know what's really interesting about that is that it means he was preparing for the who would win, Superman or Goku fight, like 40 years ahead of time.
Unintentionally, I don't think that ever crossed his mind.
Hey, Mrs. H.
Yeah. Do you know whose comic has a robot? Just Captain Orange.
Alrighty.
Yeah, I almost suggested one of mine that has a robot too, and my wife told me that was cheating. So
I was actually going to pick somebody else's comic if it wasn't this, but Carl had to go and unlist Holgrave, which I was really, really enjoying. Like not just because like a buddy of yours made a comic. Like I was that was like one of my favorite webcomics I ever read, and then he went and took it down. And I like Barrel Shell. It's just not deep enough to know if I like it more than I liked Holgrave.
Yeah, well, yet. and then he went through a page 1 rewrite for Barrel Shell too, and like Barrel Shell as it is now is awesome, but you're missing so much context from Barrel Shell version 1 and Holgrave, which we've been talking about that for years. I don't understand why he wasn't happy with Holgrave because it was so good.
Like if it was like artistically, because I know a lot of his earlier stuff, like if he was trying to shade something in, it wouldn't clip to the line, so there were like gaps and stuff like that. Just redo the page then, it was good though. I really liked the story that was going on.
Well, and one of his complaints was that he felt like the storytelling wasn't focused enough, and I'm like, I know what you're saying, but it's not hurting anything going on here because like the lead characters, and I can't remember their names right now, they don't know what's happening. So, like, if the readers are a little confused, it's because they're already seeing it through the eyes of these guys that don't know what's happening. So it's perfect.
Yeah, we're all confused together.
Yeah,
Hooray.
yeah, it's great. It's great. And as long as you get resolution out of it, then that's a perfect, like.
Yeah, and so many good influences, including this guy here. Like Toriyama was clearly one of his many influences.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously. Tezuka was one too. You can clearly see that.
And Seeger.
He also Seeger, yeah, because he really likes like all that stuff, Popeye and things. But like in his robot design, you can very easily see the Toriyama, like very. And it's like, man, I was really enjoying this on all aspects, and you ripped it from me.
Yep. Well, I'm sure it'll come out eventually, but artists, they gotta do their thing.
Because I interviewed him over on Newgrounds, and he even explained it to me, and I kind of had like that same thing. It's like you're telling me these words, but they're not computing with me.
Well, that's because you were speaking different languages.
It's okay. Well, let's move on from Carl. We can't talk about him. He's not here.
Yeah.
He's not.
That would have been my backup if I didn't pick this, and it was available.
Seven says his first comic I ever saw was a robot comic, Marvel Transformers #5. I was too young to read it, but blew my mind as I was a big fan of the cartoon and toys. Awesome cover with Shockwave.
Yeah.
Robots in disguise.
Transformers, G.I. Joe, lots and lots of 80s and 90s kids got into comics because of those properties and what Marvel was doing with them at the time. So that was not.
I would argue that Arale is better at being a robot in disguise because unless you knew, you wouldn't even guess that she's a robot.
I didn't know. I didn't even know she was a she.
I will admit, I read through the whole thing and totally forgot that we were supposed to be doing robot comics. I was just reading a comic.
Yeah. I saw the robot time machine guy, and I was like, okay, I guess this is about robots.
No, the entire comic, Dr. Slump, is about robots.
Yeah. There you go. Well, I only read one chapter, so I feel pretty vindicated in that. Robots and Chinese people.
And Japanese and all kinds of different things. Yeah. I mean, Superman shows up.
Sort of.
The werewolf showed up at the beginning of this one, just out of nowhere for no reason.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
I guess because it's the moon.
Because of the moon.
Yeah. Everything's centered around the moon in this comic. Has not been destroyed yet.
Not yet. So, is there more than one moon in the Dragon Ball universe?
It's been destroyed and remade several times.
I was gonna say I know Piccolo blew it up at least once. So.
So it doesn't just
so did
across the front.
Master Roshi back in the older Dragon Ball during a tournament. He Kamea waved it and just blew it up, and then they wished it back at one point.
Like everything else in the show.
I think, or is it? No, I think it was Kami made a new one. Somebody made a new moon. It's been a while since I read that part.
The amount of ecological disasters that.
Yeah, and then later, once we get to the part that's called Z, where Gohan goes crazy, Piccolo decides to destroy the moon.
Well, I guess we'll go ahead and move on from one comic that inspires a cartoon world to a different comic that inspired a cartoon world, and move on with Uncle Scrooge. I'll go ahead and share that one out.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
And I'll talk about why. Yeah. I've already talked about why I picked it, but we'll go through the thing real quick here.
We should let Metal go eat anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just going to sneak off and be right back.
So, who rebuilds the moon? A very special contractor.
I believe it's the same people who built the Earth in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Probably.
Slarta Bartfast. Yeah.
Come on. Sorry, guys.
Can I just say while you're pulling it up, I actually saw this comic, probably the original one. Sounds like you have a reprint or something.
Yeah, from 80.
Yeah.
This was printed in like 83 or something.
I saw it earlier than that. I saw it in the 70s, and it was at my grandma's house, and her house is nothing but antiques. So I thought she had it because she's into antiques, and it was an antique comic. And actually, it was my uncle's. He still lived at home with them. So at the time, and his comic collection is what got me into comics to a large extent. So
I believe
this is like one of the first I ever read.
I believe that the first the first comic this came out in was published in I want to say 65.
Yeah, it's possible that he had one from 65. Yeah. Still getting it pulled up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here we go.
The Robot Robbers.
The Robot Robbers. And the original one had the same cover, but it had a green and it had the Dell logo on it instead of the Whitman.
I love the ad for Dr. Solar because I've got I followed Doc Solar through chunk of Valiant time, and I went back and saw some of the Dell Gold Key issues, and it's interesting. That's a separate conversation, but it's interesting.
Well, and this starts up. I love this first panel. It's this Silver Age trope where you show a scene that may or may not be what you see in the book and the story as it goes, but it almost functions like a secondary cover, just a teaser about what you're going to see. And I love that device.
How did this happen?
How did these, the record scratch. And you're asking yourself how I got into this situation of comic books. And I think more comics ought to incorporate that device. I think that's a lot of fun. But we're writing for modern comics are writing for crusty old dudes instead of writing for new audiences. So I guess that's what you get. So, the other thing that shocked me. Now I had read this this comic, like scenes from this comic. I don't think I actually read the whole thing, but I knew it was a comic, and I'd read scenes from it through the years on different websites or whatever. But the reason, like I said, the reason I picked it is because it was based in a DuckTales episode, and so I'm going through it, and I was like, wait a second, and I think I even had in the. Do you guys remember the Panini sticker books? Or am I the actually, Twitless and Cartoon, because you guys might be too young for these, and I don't know, Hutch, maybe you're too old. I'm not sure, but back in the 80s, you used to be able to buy these sticker books for a lot of movies, and the Panini company put them together, and they would be like trading card sized stickers that you could purchase and fill them in and put them in the books. They'd be like comics of popular movies or television shows or other comic books. I never knew that they were ever adapted from comic books. I found that out later. But just if they were, especially if they were comics that were the basis of other movies, kind of a thing.
Were they also coloring books?
Panini made coloring books, but and there was one, I can't remember what it was. There was one property that was all 3D, and I had 3D glasses to get and everything.
Oh my!
And all of the pictures were line art from the property. I can't remember what it was, but it was all yeah. And there were some I think there were some activities in them too, like the mask one. Seven says he remembers those sticker books. But yeah, I think I had a Panini book of this DuckTales episode just before I started getting into comics, and so a lot of the character designs in my mind as I was remembering this story were the character designs from the Disney series, not from this comic. So I when I read through it again, I was just like, oh, okay. And the stuff that I had read and the stuff that I misremembered from having seen this episode like 5-6 times were all meshed together inside of my skull.
Oh.
So reading this again was and reading the whole thing was kind of like a wake up call and like a realigning of my own memory, my own recollection of stuff. So that was really fun. But one of the things that struck me is at the bottom of this first page is they're having this disagreement between Donald and Scrooge, and they've got these different expectations and levels of excitement, and it ends with Scrooge just enacting massive physical violence on his nephew,
who honestly deserves it.
He probably had it coming. But it was just one of those things. I was just like, whoa.
He's literally kicking his butt.
Just kicking him and right and down the stairs.
Like Donald's my favorite, but he often deserves everything that happens to him.
He was also the whipping boy, though.
Oh, and he deserves what he gets slightly in the cartoons. In the comics, he is just the suffering saint. I'm like from what I have read in the Walt Disney.
I haven't gotten to read a lot of
Duck
the comics.
Donald, he's a very different character.
In this one, I certainly felt so.
Well,
especially
in
general.
think that's a lot of Barks's touch because Barks's whole feel and Don, what's his name that took over after Barks left?
Rosa.
Yeah, Rosa.
Yeah.
They both their stories were far more adventure with comedy rather than being made mostly jokes.
Donald basically becomes Tintin.
Mm-hmm.
He's and like I said, he's played much more as the straight man and virtuous almost to a fault in many cases. The backup story for this one is Donald basically just being super caring, empathetic, and Scrooge isn't, Scrooge has got he's the miser with the heart of gold, essentially, is how they play him off.
Yep.
So.
But yeah, Donald is Donald's poor and doesn't care about not being poor, and so that's one of the reasons why I really like the Walt Disney comics. I really started to kind of fall in love with them because of how well they treated Donald. Because in the cartoons, he becomes a kind of a whipping boy, but he's also he often does deserve it. Well, I think a lot of
he's got an anger problem, and he blows things out of proportion that shouldn't be.
Right. Well, and that's one of the things about the comics that are really fun is that because not every scenario is a joke, you get the chance to see Donald outside of situations that are made to make him angry.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and I've read some of the, you know, little 8-page shorts where it is the same as the cartoons, where Donald is in a situation and he just doesn't handle it well, and he ends up with egg on his face from it or whatever. And you see situations too where in the cartoons, like Huey, Dewey, I mean, prior to DuckTales, in most of the cartoons, Huey, Dewey, and Louie are the embodiment of youthful boy energy and mischievousness, and you know, looking for fun first and consequences later. That kind of Peter Pan kind of attitude. But in the DuckTales comics, the Uncle Scrooge comics, and even some of the Donald Adventures of Donald Duck comics, there's a lot more complexity to the three boys' characteristics, and they are treated in much of the same way as Eisner treated Ebony White, where he's a young boy. They're young boys. They're prone to adventure. They have the discernment of boys. They may get themselves in too deep, but it's not because they have some sort of desire for causing trouble or for causing people headaches. They're just so full of adventure that sometimes they get themselves into trouble, rather than being there as a source of aggravation in a comedy setting.
So, the one thing I'll say to our audience before we move on is with the story, is I highly encourage people to pick up some of the Walt Disney comics. They are great, and they are very different. They are both simultaneously very comfortable and like you're like, oh, I know these characters, I know a lot of this stuff, I'm very familiar with it, and they're also extremely different, and they're very unique, and what they do with them is very singular to what these comics produce. I remember being very shocked when I was reading them, and because we all grew up and had seen, you know, an amount of Walt Disney cartoons, and we'd seen the sort of patterns, kind of like with the Looney Tunes. You know, this is what happens when you put these two cartoon characters together. There's a lot of routines, essentially, and the comics, the Walt Disney comics specifically, really just go into very interesting territory. So I highly recommend them.
Mm-hmm. And what Seven just noted about Donald's voice, that's the reason why the comics are so different, is that he doesn't come across with that unintelligible voice. And so it's
I mean, in my
like
head, I would still be reading it with that voice.
They have to treat him as a person who can actually talk and make conversation back and forth. And I liked it in the most recent version of DuckTales on Disney Plus. Right before I canceled Disney Plus, I finished watching the entire DuckTales as fast as I could. And in the later episodes, they made Donald, they gave him like a voice chip that changed his voice so that he could be understood.
Oh yeah.
And
oh god, I would hate that.
Like, that was actually fun. And I think he comes across more the way he does in the comics, of the Karl Barks comics, because you can't just have him exploding at the nephews, and that's why his relationship with the nephews, as you say, comes across very differently. They're a little more, there's a little more depth to them, because there has to be.
Well, and I noticed about that the new cartoon was that even in that, hearing his normal voice, he still was played or voiced in a way that he was able to get off a whole lot more complex dialogue than he did in the classic cartoons. And I think that's one thing you're also seeing in these comics, is that they have big word bubbles where he will get into major detail about stuff. Often in the cartoons, he would kind of just say, it'd be like Scooby-Doo, say a word here or there that you could understand, and the rest was just the person garbling. And so it's not just you can understand him.
I don't know, man.
You can
I've seen Donald say some pretty complex sentences.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
but
some of
at
it
the
depends
same
on the
time-
writing too. I mean, like, what's the purpose of the scene?
Really?
Like, I remember the
Yeah.
original DuckTales movie, the pilot, I should say. That was actually a 4-part
Launchpad McQuack.
Yeah, there was a lot in that. You know, when Donald goes to join the Navy, right? And that's why the triplets go to live with Scrooge, is because Donald signed up for the Navy. And so there's a series of scenes in that first like story arc where Donald is having difficulty communicating with his superior officers on the aircraft carrier he's stationed to, and so that's played for laughs. But when when Scrooge and the kids come to to the ship for part of the thing continues, you have a lot more of that Barksian character that gets a time to shine, and because he's just one of the ducks all can all understand him, so there's not the same level of jokes.
Well, even like in a lot of the old cartoons, even though he was speaking like Donald, most of his friends were still talking to him like they understood every single word that he said. Like
that is
Mickey
true.
and Goofy don't really have trouble understanding Donald.
Yeah. But of course, you're talking about the old cartoons from the 80s, and of course, I'm talking about the original shorts that Carl Barks had to create a Donald Duck comic book from. I'm saying, back then he was basically, oh yeah, it's about all the dialogue that a lot of the cartoons had, and so he's developing a character for the strip way back when, before even Scrooge came about. So anyway, getting back to the robot robbers, we've gone way off on talking.
We've gone way far
Donald.
afield. Absolutely.
Yeah, I noticed the design is a little different from the what they did for the cartoons.
That was interesting. Can we put that up for a second? Or maybe after?
It is, isn't it? What?
No. I mean, I'd love to show people some clips from the show because it was really interesting.
Oh,
I watched it and read this, and it was like trying, comparing where they went off script and where they didn't was really neat.
I think I actually have Robot Robbers as a short somewhere in my videos, but I don't know where.
I have it up here right now if you want.
Oh,
okay. Let's get to you then.
Okay. So,
where's my thingamy?
Let him present. And yes, the robot dinosaur in the Batcave. The one thing that they won't put in any of the Batman movies, and it should be there. Why the Batcave never really seems like the Batcave to me. It's missing the 3 elements that always have to be there.
Okay. So,
yeah.
Let's see here.
You lose. Let me show you our cement.
All right, careful. This is the quickest way for us to get taken off the air.
There we go.
Pause it
I
right
would show just like
We could pause it right here, and that's fine.
It's Disney.
I know.
But yeah,
we'll just show a sliver of it there, like that.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things you can see. You can definitely see they still are informed by that original design.
Definitely, yeah.
But they're making it specifically to look more like a construction equipment.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, that was the idea that this time it was built by what's his name?
Gyro Gearless.
Yeah, they're designed by Gyro and built with Flintheart Glumgold's money, which is also an interesting little takeoff. Just because that's one of the things in this story that is, I guess we should probably get into some spoiler territory. Move this along. In this story, these robots are being built by the city of Duckburg. They've been commissioned by the mayor, and I'm just like, mayors don't have that kind of authority.
Oh, at the end, he has some strange authority.
Oh man, yeah, definitely.
He's the entire city council. There's nobody else on there.
Yeah, well, and apparently the kid's got powers that the governor should have. He's got powers that the president should have. That Congress should have.
He wanted to fund this giant robot, and he didn't talk to Scrooge at all before he did it.
He just paid for it out of the tax coffers. And then
it's because he knows Scrooge would say no.
Yeah, for sure.
And
what do they say?
Indicates how much tax,
like $1 billion or something like that. It comes. So
that's how much tax they have from Scrooge for this rich city. It's like you're taxing Scrooge. You got plenty of tax money to play with.
And so Scrooge says,
"Is that why they made him a pig?"
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is, the mayor of Duckburg is a pig. He also, it's shockingly how he seems to be drawn in many scenes. I don't necessarily think this was intentional. It's just that supposed to evoke that upper class, that high society, upper crust kind of East Coaster.
Well, he's definitely supposed to have gotten into his position through corruption. That's why he's
yeah. But he also looks shockingly like FDR. and I don't know.
Oh, I see.
I'm not going to say that. I don't imagine that that's intentional, but that was a little.
I thought you were going to say the Monopoly guy.
Once again, I would repeat myself.
Yeah.
Toyless,
But
you know what I'm thinking of looking at this picture, right?
Oh gosh, our Sonic comic.
No, Superman landscaping.
Wait. Oh, the super landscaping. Yeah.
Tudor says FDR was
Probably.
Well, now that is an interesting question. What is the definition of a cyborg? If you're in a wheelchair, and that's like half of your movement, does that qualify you as a cyborg?
Well, he wasn't a
had
very
metal-
well
he had
oiled
metal
one. I'll tell you
braces.
that.
Yeah, he had metal braces whenever they had him standing up. So I don't know. It's metal legs.
Yeah, right.
I think you have to have electronics present to be part cyborg, but I'm not sure you can just be have mechanical.
So if someone has a pacemaker,
so if somebody has a pacemaker, if they've got like cochlear implants, they're definitely a cyborg.
all right, cool.
I'm a cyborg. I've got a pacemaker.
All right. Guest of honor tonight.
Yeah, there you go. It's all about you, Hutch.
I'm my favorite robot.
So what if you're bound to a rascal then?
Let's move on. So, as we have here, obviously he's. I love how Scrooge is the only guy in the back. He's questioning why the mayor's doing it. It's to ease man's burden, right? So the robot can do all the menial labor that normal people do, so there won't be jobs for that. That's great. Way to get to.
I have to say, I'm not the biggest. I actually like the. I think the cartoon version of the robots is a bit of an improvement.
Yeah, the design. It is.
Yeah, the design. Definitely. You could tell they just kind of like threw it together. It was like robot. Give him like retractable arms that look like I built it in my garage.
Yeah. Well, and they're all, the fun thing about the robot design here is they keep the rubber arm style. And so, right. I mean, you could say, I don't like that. That's fine. But I think I kind of applaud that they did that because it's a keeping with the rest of them.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm just saying, like overall, I just this was one of the weaker parts. The robot design just wasn't doing it for me.
I'll bet you that in both the cartoon and the comic, design, a thought has been put into the design as far as making it easy to draw. Right?
Could be.
I mean, I guess
a lot of round objects we can just stencil from any angle.
Hiroshi says robot aesthetics in the 80s are more fun than robot aesthetics in the 60s. That is a debate, sir. You probably get some very contested viewpoints there.
Yeah, that's actually a really that'd be a really good topic is robot aesthetics. But moving on from here, I love it's got the face. That's the front end loader. Or I mean that
was clever.
The backhoe kind of thing to it. Yeah. And I'm going to point out one of my favorite things about Uncle Scrooge comics, and this goes back to my love of DuckTales as a young child, is the Beagle Boys, man. I mean, these guys, they're out in society. They're wearing black masks. they've got their prison serial numbers etched into their outfits. They're
it's like they're permanent escapees, and nobody bothers to put them back in until they do something.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I noticed. I remember noticing how in the cartoon you had Ma Beagle, and she's totally in disguise, yet she still has her mask on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I love the most how they're at the Lockheed factory. Obviously, it played on Lockheed, but it's also the fact that they are lacking in heed. They're making robots for the guys to steal.
And nobody's listening, and no one listens to Scrooge on the whole thing. So he's like, "This is a bad idea."
I think the part that cracked me up there is that he says something's going to go wrong, and I think it's like 2 panels later it goes wrong. And he says, "Oh, so quickly it went wrong." Right there,
yeah. I was asleep.
Yeah, so he panics about it, and then I think it was within a page, and he's like, "No, they've gone wrong."
Right here,
it's like that meme, and nothing can go wrong. Oh no, it all went wrong.
Yeah, right here. Yeah. Oh no! Oh, my worst fears were realized already.
I'd know that snicker anyplace. And so the ongoing feud between foxes and dogs. I mean, between ducks and dogs. All those sort of tension. And I love this panel. I always love the giant foot panel. Whether we're talking robots or kaiju, or you're talking about actual giants in comics, this is one of my favorite panels on stuff. It's the giant foot panel.
So for Edming, yes, that means Reese is a foot guy.
Oh.
Oh, here you go, Reese. Here's some ASMR for
I outed you.
Ducks and dogs. Right?
Oh, I see.
What?
Some ASMR for your ducks and dogs war.
Oh, I see. Okay. Was that a clicker?
It's the Nintendo Zapper for Duck Hunt.
Oh, I see. Oh, there you go.
Okay,
I got you.
I get it now.
The robot costs $10 billion, and there's 4 of them
Yeah.
for Duckburg.
So
That's like
Duckburg,
chump
yes.
change for Scrooge. He's like a quadrillionaire or something.
It is funny that this town had the budget to, without Scrooge, to buy 4 of these things.
Well,
it's gotta be the
$40
excess
billion
from...
in 1960.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if
Well,
you have
again,
this
Scrooge,
quadrillionaire there, right,
Yeah.
and he's doing all this business
Paying
there,
taxes.
there has to be like excess money from the things doing business with his businesses.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Well, one other thing I love about the Scrooge comics is how they would never actually give real numbers. They'd call them multiplicillion, extifacillion,
Umpty squazillionaire.
Yeah,
And actually, that's
exactly.
I guess one of
Yeah.
the funniest things is here. So, that there's the Beagle Boys are into the Lockheed factory. The security guards are going to try to help, but they can't because the giant robot.
Can we just take a second to realize that in 1960, $1 billion was an impossible number? That's why I think they used it.
Uh-huh.
Like it was the impossible number. It's like you might as well have said 11D, right? It's like it's this made up number, and like inflation has hit the point now where you're like $10 billion. Yeah, it's about as much as a jet costs.
That's what that would cost. Yeah.
And of course, that's the thing about Scrooge is that he has more money than exists in the physical universe, and he keeps it all in coins in
Right.
safe right in the middle of a city.
Right. I'm just saying.
It's so that
it's a sad
economics.
commentary on our times in terms of where inflation is catching up with Scrooge McDuck's.
Well, it's
Right.
smart, right? So he just keeps it all in hard assets, so it's not circulating. So it keeps the economy kind of like stable for everyone else, and he still gets to be rich.
There you go. So he tears it open. The other Beagle Boys get in there. They're robots, and they've got these mechanical monsters going across. And of course, they head to the money bin, right? And this is the great thing.
I love that they're he has all this money and he's fighting them off with a cannon.
And then they talk about it's 5 feet thick, it's steel plated, there's never going to get through. And for some reason, the scientists, the professors, built sledges big enough for us man robots to use. So, thank goodness for those professors.
$1 billion sledges.
I'm reminded of Godzilla versus Kong here.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then the sledgehammer's butt breaks, so they just pick the whole thing up. Which the funny thing about me is I always imagined that the money bin, it has this big thing above ground, but you walk in at ground level. So I had always assumed it was like 3 stories under the
Same.
Yeah. So it's like
that might be the lore. Like, so this is before. When was this? Is this a Barks?
Oh yeah, this is a Barks. Yeah.
Is it okay?
So
But
that may have been developed later, or may have been missed off for this particular story, or who knows what.
I don't think buildings in cartoons are allowed to have foundations.
Yeah.
It could be. So then also, I love this here. We can carry the loot away in these buckets the professors made for us. And I'm thinking, that's not what professors do, guys.
Bill Gates has stocks and bonds. Uncle Scrooge has giant buckets of coins.
Well, and it's not even Uncle Scrooge. It's the guys at the Lockheed factory, the professors at the
Yeah.
Lockheed factory that just made it for him. So, hey, look, it's little Lulu. Okay, so and where was the thing? So they're dumping money into these giant buckets. Scrooge and the kids get all caught into it. They're using money. They're patting themselves with cash to be shock absorbers.
I thought that was funny.
I thought that's great. And I wanted $1 million, not a millionaire. That's great. Where was the thing? I think I missed it. There's one line in here where they're talking about saving money, about counting their money in tons instead of dollars, and I was just thinking about this.
Oh, they said they're going to separate it.
That's right. Yeah. They're going to separate it by pound, by tonnage.
Yeah.
And I love the they're dancing the Watusi to be celebratory. So of course that's appropriate for 1965. It's very hip and keen there, Mr. Barks. And
Twitless, can you confirm that is not what professors do?
You know what? It depends on the department. So that's really, I think, the most accurate way to answer that question.
Okay, the better question is,
I figured they'd be more doing like
one.
They're probably PhDs, but I doubt they're actually doing professor work. They're probably doing more just like R&D, like they designed the systems of the robot, maybe figured out how to fuel it. I doubt they're actually making things themselves.
Well, yeah, those are the engineers, though. The professor professes.
Yeah, which is not what they're doing. They're just engineers with PhDs.
Yep. But that was the funny.
There's your cover right there.
Yeah. Or inspired by it.
Paid off the
In
cover.
fiction, doctor and professor just means genius.
When you're 6, yes, this is true. And so,
okay,
Scrooge,
now this was my favorite part. This was a really funny game.
Oh, and Scrooge gets the plane, and he's negotiating with the guy, and he hands him all the money. Yes, but.
I kept waiting for him to be like, he doesn't have fuel in it or something.
Yeah, something like that. But it's like his wife comes out and says, well, you're not supposed to hurt those robots. Well, sure, but I got tongue-tied with all this cash.
Jim Tuner says, if I endowed a chair in bucket research at a university, I could get a professor to build buckets. Yes, I was going to say, like, it really depends on the school and depends on the department and depends on the funding. There you go.
Yeah, how much grants can you get?
There was grant money in giant buckets.
Seven's pointing out they're doing the robot, not the wrong decade, though, Seven. Wrong decade.
Yeah, but it kind of looks like he's right.
Yeah. No, I do think you're right. They do look more like the robot in the Watusi. That's a very accurate, especially down here.
Yeah.
Well, also the funny thing is, it's already showed that all of their movement is lever action, right? So these guys are dancing or whatever, but that's just like the fourth one up to the third position, the second one to the fourth position.
Why do they have all of these dance moves mapped out with levers?
When do they have time to learn this? Is it already? I mean, do they just have it inside of the cab in case this should happen? In case of dancing, turn to page 14 on the manual. Right? I
love how you're putting way more thought into this than the people who made the
yeah.
So I also
it's the job of the show.
Here's Scrooge's. He's got this. He's got all hands on the bomb site with the crop duster that he just like jumped in and knows how to fly, which is amazing. And then he crop dusts them, and it doesn't do enough. Oh, this is great! I love this ingenuity they found. It's just a found equipment, right? So they take the thing, turns into a tennis, turns the frame around the tennis court, the fencing around the tennis court into a tennis racket, and just slaps him out of the sky, and the whole business.
And what's really crazy about that is that a Beagle Boy actually did something smart.
Yeah.
Made a fly swatter. Yeah,
that's pretty cool. Okay, so we're gonna move this along just a little bit here, because the most unlikely way that they're able to outwit the Beagle Boys is by making roasting prunes. They're cooking up prunes, and this guy just can't get enough prunes, so
I love that this guy was tearing up, thinking that Scrooge was gone because he used to make us so much money.
Well, and that's also great. I also love here how the guy's like getting out of his robot, because he's looking for prunes, and Huey's here. He's got the prunes cooking, but it's just boiled. It's not like he's made anything with them. He just put just boiling some prunes in a saucepan, and like, oh man, sauced prunes. That's the good stuff. This is
the good stuff, though. I can't argue with that.
This is the best, and this is the thing about these comics. They're like, the adventure is real in these Barks, Uncle Scrooge comics. A lot of Disney comics are like this from back in the day. The adventure is real, the comedy is real, the whimsy is real. They're able to do. I've talked about this before. How like it's hard getting cross-genre stories to work right. Because you've got if you're gonna do more than one genre in your story, you've got to fulfill all the expectations of that, right? You can't laze out on the mystery and have it and just because it's a comedy, the mystery doesn't have to be real. No, the mystery needs to be real. You got to be able to pay out on it, and that's something the Barks did on the regular with these things. And I'm always impressed with how everything that they're doing, it's true to the thing, even if it's like a little ridiculous or a little overblown or a little whatever. It's still true to what they're doing with it.
That's another commonality I find with Tintin. Tintin was very, very funny and silly, but then also dead serious at the same time. He was able to, Hergé and was able to really strike this very interesting balance. And I'm not saying it's perfect. There's obviously weaknesses and all these things, but how often he succeeded at unifying those things. I think Barks and many of the other Disney comics that I've read have done such a good job of unifying those different tones to find. Overall, it's still bright and cheerful, but the genuine adventure and the fact that the stakes are still able to be raised in a decent way without becoming meaningless. With the humor being utilized as well. So,
and of course, there are certain things to take into consideration, like the fact that Scrooge instantly knows how to operate this equipment, just like the Beagle Boys instantly know how to operate this ridiculously complex equipment.
Well, if it's simplified enough that the Beagle Boys can do it, I'm sure Scrooge could figure out anything they could.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But he goes full on, WWE on this here.
Yeah, full on. Yeah, this is again what sells the seriousness of it is, and that was the thing that first started to attract me to the Walt Disney comics was how, it's still humorous, but like you can tell that there is a genuine spirit to this action scene.
This dude's using a house to throw the other robot.
Yeah,
I had not picked up on that before. He got his leg tore off, and he's just throwing a house.
So the robots get wrecked.
Just so wrecked.
Just wrecked.
But then the mayor, the pig mayor, gets thrown into a mud hole, and that's it. That's you can't put me in the mud now. Go ahead and just wreck those things, and. The mayor tells the National Guard to just attack. I was like, I don't think the mayor can do that.
Well, I think at that point, he had been begging them not to.
Very similar to the one I put up in the fact that there's something about a grown child, right? I'm gonna call it a grown child, an adult child. Who is just seriously playing in a toy box when making a story, right? Like he's got these toys. To him, all the toys make sense. Like they are characters. So he's like, I'm going to do fun things, but they're going to play by their own rules. But they're going to stay to their rules though, because these are the characters I'm envisioning. And it's literally just this adult child in their toy box. And then you get to see what they're playing. And I think a lot of these more like toonish things can be described as that. And there's a wonderment to it. Because especially if you're writing for kids, that's what the kids are doing as well. So you kind of have to like embody that in your writing.
So here we get to the more of funny governmental power, and I agree.
This was the moment that it was just like I just
great governmental power. And here's your liberal democracy at work, everybody. This is modern fiscal policy. The Uncle Scrooge gets all of his money back, but the mayor decides that somebody's got to pay, and the only one with that kind of money is Scrooge McDuck. So obviously, we just got to take it from him. So it's like $30 billion owe me. That'll take most of one of these buckets. So Uncle Scrooge's, cash fortune is cut by a quarter, a full quarter, for the crime of getting his money back.
Not because it's his fault, but because he's the only one who can afford to pay.
Not
because
almost a full quarter.
In the cartoon,
Almost
it says
a
most of
one of those buckets. Fair enough.
You notice in the cartoon they changed it so that it was McLum who was responsible for it because he had built the robots. So they just billed him for the damages to the city.
Yep.
Here it's just like, you have money, pay.
And they have to pay back the investment that the mayor already signed off on to have them built in the first place.
Right.
The mayor gets no culpability because he's the mayor. But then this is the next phase. So after eating the rich, right? We're gonna go back in here and say, as for you, Beagle Boys, it's time to send you back to prison to be rehabilitated again.
And they're always back out, so it must be really efficient.
Okay.
No, I mean, they're also always wearing their inmate outfits, so I don't think it's efficient at all.
Yeah,
they can't keep them in the prison.
So it's very efficient. They don't have to do the turnaround. They just put it back in the cell.
And the Beagle Boys don't have to pay for their own laundry. They'll just go back to jail to have it done for them.
Oh my gosh, it's like Otis from the Andy Griffith Show.
Yeah. Well, that's why they're always dressed in their prison uniforms.
So guys, pay attention, everybody. I want you to pay attention. When people say that politics has always been in comics, they are correct. So that's mine. I think I have way more time than I should have.
We never realized.
I've taken way more of the time on my story. Cartoonicus, do you want to go ahead and get yours shared, or how do you want to do that?
Yeah. I'll save you some time. The end. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. No, Emmy the robot. Let me know when I'm up.
Oh yeah, you are. Man.
Okay.
Is this an Italian creator?
Possibly. I haven't looked that far into it. I follow him on Instagram.
I read this and I didn't realize there was more to it than the one story that I scrolled down to the bottom of.
Oh,
definitely a very Sicilian name.
I apologize.
Well, if anyone you're going to start out though, it was this 3. I think it's only 3 issues. Yeah, number 3 here. Into it, they pulled this brilliant job of making an old 1960s, not just commercial, but like almost infomercial, where they're talking all about how Sterling Robotics is known for our, our high quality.
I have to interrupt. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But Jim Tudor just lit the most fire comment that I have to bring up here. That is.
Barks may have been woke, but I don't think Rosa is.
No. I just have to point out about this comic strip here. You notice how all the panels are shaped like the tube of an old TV.
That's what it's supposed to be.
They have the scan lines
commercial. Too. Yeah, and I love that. And then we get to, of course they're showing the whole thing is made. You can just hear the old-fashioned music in the background of this, right? Mm-hmm. And these nandroids, they're the ultimate help. They can do everything, and they can do it a million times better than humans ever could, right? They'll become a party.
I love how she's pushing a vacuum instead of being a vacuum.
Right.
When we did get robot vacuums, they're just the robot is in the vacuum.
Right. And then we get the Sterling himself, who is so clearly supposed to be Walt Disney, right? It's just a great retro effect and everything. Everybody's so happy, right? It's this classic 1960s atomic family feel. These nandroids are gonna change the world, right? I love, and there you go. If you this is very clearly made to look like the Walt Disney logo and all, right? Mm-hmm. So we get off to that, right? And Emmy here, one of the nandroids, is working for this family, and they're living that life. This cute little girl they've got that she's become enamored with, and they've got questions, but they everything's kind of happy-go-lucky. It's just a gag-a-day strip. They throw little jokes in there, right? Until one day, she's at a birthday party here, and they point out that she's been having these weird glitches in her hand. Every once in a while, something goes wrong just when she thinks she's got it under control, and she's been hiding it. And from the family, been trying to keep it under control of her own, and then suddenly, here's this cake with all the sparklers, and people are taking pictures, and something inside Emmy goes nuts, right? And she goes immediately into safety mode and just ruins everything. And suddenly you're like, oh, this is more than just a funny comic, isn't it? Right? And the poor little girl, right? She's, in case I needed to sell that, right? This is not just a funny comic. Suddenly the story starts. So Emmy has to get sent to back to Sterling to see what's wrong. And Sterling is, all the guys are worried about what'll happen if word gets out that one of their nandroids malfunctioned and she could have hurt people, right? So a bunch of people want to just disable her, dismantle her, give the family a new nandroid and just be done with it. And Emmy overhears it, and now she's on the run for her life, right? And she accidentally ends up in the trash. Poor Emmy, right? So I'm going through my. I was actually following this at the time mostly through Instagram, so it just meant little things, notifications would come up here and there. All of a sudden, something comes up on my screen, and the artwork looks familiar, but I'm like, wait a minute, is this the same artist but a different comic? So, no, we've got part 2 coming in here. Now we get the most interesting character, or one of the most interesting characters I've ever read. This, kind of street urchin of a character with the greatest sense of sarcasm. And it's just really interesting to watch her. Here she is trying to.
Are you showing anything, or are you just talking about it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting to hit the button. How long have I been doing
Just to
that?
let you know, it's been on the original page for a while.
Oh my gosh! You let me know earlier, man.
We didn't know you
I
were
wasn't
ready.
sure if you were trying to show it or you're just, talking about it.
Oh my gosh! I'm sorry. Let me go back.
We're still looking at Sterling Robotics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. This is all the stuff that happens at the birthday party. Things go nuts. She's hiding in the factory trying to get away. She accidentally gets tossed out with the trash.
No.
And so lo and behold, on the other side of the tracks, here's this character, right? And she's, right away they do a great job of making her both empathetic and a sleazeball all at the same time, right? Which makes her such an interesting character. But she's going to end up ultimately running into Emmy. And, there's some back and forth. Right? She gets in trouble with the school attendant. She gets kicked out of there. She runs into Emmy. She realizes that, she could have an investment in this robot, because this is what she does. She collects trash, right? And then fixes things up. She's got inventions and stuff she makes. She tries to resell stuff. So here we go. She has the most advanced piece of technology on the planet at her hands, right? And she takes her back to this old shabby, once must have been very nice mansion where this kind of crazy lady has taken
an outdate.
all these other robots, right? And they go out and they find junk and trinkets and stuff, and they bring them back to her. And suddenly I realized this is Oliver Twist. Emmy here is Oliver. This is the Artful Dodger, right? and I don't have it up, but meanwhile, of course, her family is having to cope without her. They're realizing that they can't do anything because they've gotten so used to her doing everything for them. So we've got that side, right? The rich family who's looking for Oliver. We've got characters now that I don't have here, but we found our Sykes. I think we found the character who is, what's her name? Is it Jenny? No, Sykes' girlfriend. I'm trying to remember. You're starting to see all the beats being hit, right? Emmy finds herself out in the street. She meets this, kind of shady kid who brings her back to where the weird boss character is having all the orphans, essentially, only the robots, bring her stuff. And then there's going to be a villain who's going to want Emmy for herself. It is just Oliver Twist rehashed out. And that's what's fascinating to me about this. This
or
comic.
Great Expectations.
Yeah. But and if finally we end up with this hilarious strip where she's at essentially what is the DMV for robotics, right? And they're going through all the same things that we all know. It's taking forever to get through it. And then she ends up having to be served by an AI. And everything the AI does is so bad, right? And let's see that. I love this. It's actually having her pick, like, here's, pick out the parts. You've all done this when you're trying to log into Facebook, right? You guys know this, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm laughing at that. And of course it says, please select all the squares that contain a horse, and there's a horse in it. And it's like, time's up. What about the test, right? And she gets so frustrated. She says, I demand to speak to a human. I love that. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most ingenious strip I have ever read in like any comic ever. I am loving a robot demanding from another robot to speak to a human. Oh, and I won't spoil too much about it. Every strip, ends up with this kind of great, just stylistic, fun, always interesting stuff. And then you're trying to figure out every moment, how does it connect to the original Oliver story? You're like, oh, I get it. I get he's doing this and he's doing that. And that's why I picked it.
Yeah.
I do love that.
I only got 13 strips in, so it was before it was just before she meets the family. And so I didn't get to any of the real story beats. Well, the first dozen strips or so deal with the world building in a really fun way. And one of the things I think is really interesting is they talk about every robot has to go to a robot college,
right?
And where they're learning appropriate behaviors and why they're appropriate and all that other kind of stuff. And the fun thing about that to me is that it's every strip is funny and silly, and it's got some good pacing and good some good pacing and some good information and some good jokes, and very excellent gag-a-day kind of stuff. But it's also world building, so they're doing all this complex world building that plays into how the story shapes out, and you don't even notice because it's just funny gag-a-day stuff.
Right.
And it's like reading Get Fuzzy while they're explaining the whole concerning hobbits bit, and from the prologue to the Lord of the Rings, and so yeah, I thought that was a fun thing they did there, and I'm excited to read where it goes from there. But like I said, I only got 13 strips in before we had to call it a show. So.
Well, that's the cool thing. At your leisure, especially if you are following it on Instagram or something, because whenever the next strip is up, it's just going to pop up, and you go, okay, let me read this. Takes 6 panels, and we'll wait for the next one.
Mm-hmm. So, what everybody else think of Emmy the robot?
Is everyone okay? What's going on?
It's very. I was going to say I'm not surprised that that Cartoonicus chose it. It's the Disney art style is very. It's kind of funny that we just read the Karl Barks book. Although I'd say that I think Emmy is channeling a different. It's not like because Disney has those two styles, right? It's got the Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck style, which is like what they do for their cartoon animal characters.
Merry Melodies.
And especially the anthropomorphic ones. Right. And then you have the Disney style that is Disney princess style, where it's cartooned to a point, but it's got this kind of cartoonish realism attached to it. And that's where Emmy is. So it's that other side of Disney. And so some of the characters
inspiration for and overlap with old anime before it became really sharp.
So like for this one, like I the vibes are very much like 101 Dalmatians. Like some of the character designs and everything, I was like, I've seen that character before.
The 101 Dalmatians, Aristocrat, Fox the Hound.
Right, exactly.
Also, in many ways, the actual design of the characters' personalities, though, like at this point right here that you're seeing where these two characters finally met, just the way the scene is going, the way the dialogue was going, I was already picturing like a Pixar movie. Like there's a certain, and we've always talked about this in the backgrounds of so many of our conversations, right? There's a kind of cinematography almost that comes across. You're like, I can see this up on the big screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure, and that's one thing that would be worth looking at, maybe with a more thorough reading of this. One thing we've been talking about is the behind the stage, all you viewers, so you let you in on some of the stuff, is we've been talking about the differences between comics that are written only to or primarily to be comics, to use the language of comics to its utmost, and comics that are written from the perspective of screenplays, and how some people write comics for storyboarding, and that's their thoughts are the language of film, whereas some people write comics with the language of comics in mind. Well, there's enough crossover between these, relatively recent sister arts. They're definitely not the same, and I think that's something that I would be interested to read more of Emmy and get the feeling for which one they're really looking at here. Like with the advert pages and some of those early pages, they're definitely leaning on this, Walt Disney Presents sort of infotainment kind of.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That's what I was.
Well, I do think because we have to look at the format too. If you are going to do something that is more TV or silver screen, where you're looking at a storyboard, where you're looking at like just a wide frame at a time, as opposed to going to a page, which a lot of people have used like graphic novels and stuff as their storyboards to pitch movies, the infinite scroll webtoon format is much more fit to that frame by frame play.
Yep.
That is true.
It definitely is. It definitely is. In fact, there was about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, there was a real heated conversation about that over on our Twitter group.
I remember.
I feel like I've seen it pop up several times.
Nearly got ugly. I'm just going to say that. Man, I really enjoyed the wholesomeness, and I definitely think there's some edge to a lot of the presentation of wholesomeness in the early pages. There is a veneer of question that implies.
I certainly expect Sterling to either be the hero at the end or the villain. I'm not sure which yet.
or is Sterling even real? That's one of my questions.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I have to say, for all the talk of Disney, this reminds me more of Brad Bird, who has, of course, worked for Disney. Since, I could see that it kind of reminds me of his Family Dog cartoon and things like that. I could kind of see him turning this into something.
Yeah.
If it were hand drawn, I get a lot of Iron Giant 50s vibes.
Yeah. No,
this,
definitely. I think that's a really good noticing on that. And Iron Giant draws a lot from artistically, stylistically from that, and even in its time frame, a lot with that late 50s, early 60s Disney TV stuff.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely there's a common pool in there. But yeah, this was a good pick. Thank you for sharing that cartoon. I guess I may have to put it on my my follow list. Keep up on that.
Well, and of course, it's still being made, so I too look forward to see where this story goes.
Definitely. So I mentioned this in our introduction. In the exact opposite vein of the story, is Alex and Ada from Image Comics, and I have a question about that, and I did not look at I did not have time to look it up here, but it's Jonathan Luna and Sarah Vaughn are the creative team on that. Isn't Twitless? Tell me if I'm wrong on here. Isn't Sarah Vaughn? Wasn't she also, or am I totally thinking of a different person? But one of the partners who did oh my goodness, I can't remember the name of the book right now. Pyramus and Thisbe in Space.
Are you talking about Saga?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I
am not sure on that.
I did not look it up ahead of time, but I could be totally wrong. So guys,
that's Brian Vaughn. You're talking about
okay. It's Brian Vaughn and Fiona something or other. Yeah, okay.
Fiona Staples.
Staples. There you go. So totally wrong.
But you're right on the Vaughn. Yeah, the same last name there.
I got one name right. That doesn't count. It's not. It's a different person. But anyway, so Twitless, go ahead. Let's talk a little bit about that. And I guess I can share the screen if you want, because I actually have it loaded up here if you want.
That's good. I'm gonna keep it fast because it's getting late. And,
yeah, for sure.
Gonna have to bounce a little bit.
Well, and we didn't get a whole lot of story in this selection either, because it's just the first two issues is what we looked at.
Yeah, and that's why I tried to. Normally we try to select one, but I was like, the first issue gives you like almost nothing. So
almost nothing, right?
So I was like I had, but it's a fast read. So I was like, okay, I feel like 2 is okay, because at least wanted to show a little bit of what is going on here. So the basic pitch here is it's a, and this is something that I think that the Luna brothers like to do, which is kind of do like relational stories. But essentially,
they did, oh, never mind. Go ahead.
So the pitch here is that you've got a young man who is, he's not doing hot. You can just see it in the artwork right there, and he's suffering from post-breakup woes, and he's kind of just
quarter life crisis.
Yeah, he's not enjoying life right now, and his grandmother is just, she's rich. And she is swearing by these new androids. And this is obviously in a future where, robots are doing a lot. They've started to take over a lot of jobs, as it were. Started to do a lot. Artificial intelligence has evolved to a point of sentience, essentially. Although the background for this story was that there's a lot of fear about AI because there was like a massacre. AI became sentient, Our worst fears were realized, as Scrooge says.
But people are not so weirded out that they don't have chips implanted in their brains and are communicating through thought bubbles. Which I was just like, if you're afraid of the AIs taking over, the best thing to do is to tap yourself into the net.
Yeah.
Well, what's funny is like it's called Prime Wave, and it's like I feel like we're like 2 years away from that being a thing.
No, it's more than that, but
I know that Elon Musk is already talking about putting a chip in your head. So like this is
people have been wanting to do that for a long time. It's a really good use in the story because you're looking at the whole transhumanism aspect, and this story has several gradients of that slippery slope, if I may use the loaded term.
Sure.
But one of the things that is really interesting about it too, I mean, as far as from practical aspect, is we're we're way far away from decoding anything other than basic motor controls with brains. But that I mean,
you say that, but like again, blink and see how fast AI accelerates that.
Yeah.
So like what point I'm trying to make is that what's interesting about this book is that this book was it's like 2000s, I think 2006, 2007, something like that. And what's interesting is I think some of the things that are talked about, actually, this was 2013, 2015. Yeah. So 2015. So it's still like 8 years ago, but I think that some of the stuff that's going on now may make the stuff that was explored in this story even more relevant.
Well, I couldn't help thinking, does a comic about this stuff count as AI art?
I will say that the artwork is actually one of the weaker parts in the piece, although, it's not, I don't think it holds the story back too much, but it is a little robotic.
I was going to say, I wonder if that's on purpose because it's supposed to show how mundane his life is.
And it could be. I mean, because you get
but...
like this panel that's up on the screen right now. You get this page, I should say. You get these two panels that are virtually identical, right? They're almost copy and pasted. They probably are copy and pasted, except with elements being added in as it goes to change things up. Like the hand is moved, all that kind of stuff. But it's one of those things where I think that it does make it feel
more machine-like,
alien. Yeah.
Plays into the themes here. Yeah,
the actual story is an uncanny valley, right?
A bit. So anyways, we have a world where like the lines are starting to get blurred. People have like artificial, like they have these, they control machines with their minds. He's thinking, and that's a cool part in terms of language of comics. How his thought balloons are actually mental commands to change the next channel or to call mom or whatever. And so I do, from a comic standpoint, there's a unique usage of the thought balloon there. So that's one thing to point out that I think is interesting. When he receives phone calls, it's this kind of thought balloon situation. They're having conversations in thought balloons because they're literally thinking and having those conversations through this technology. So there's, like I said, that you're getting this sort of like blur between the man and the machine right there. But then where the line gets crossed really is the fact this guy really wants to have a human relationship. And so there's this typical setup. There's a girl that I think is interested in him. And they've been ships passing in the night, essentially. And in any other story, I think her name's Isabel. She would be like the romantic lead. But instead, his bossy Scrooge McDuck grandmother says, I have this robo lover, and he just gives me all the orgasms, so I'm gonna basically buy you one for your birthday.
Yeah,
it's so weird. Does anyone else find it weird that it's the old person embracing the technology and the young person who's not interested?
No,
not at all.
No, because I mean, like this woman is hedonism. I mean, that's the.
Yeah, she's the early adopter. She's got the money to get one of these, and he doesn't. So yeah,
because it costs almost like $1 million. It's like $800,000 to buy the.
Yes, yeah. They said it's $1 million, and she's like, it's 0.8 million. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, big difference. Yeah, I can buy that. So the end of the first issue is she buys.
Here's a line right there.
0.8 million, yeah. So she buys an android for her grandson, and the second issue, which I think is really interesting, is he's just like trying to process, like and like talk to it, and he knows it's a machine, but it looks like a person, and so he said there's these really awkward moments. Like there's a lot of awkwardness in these first few issues, but the awkwardness. He's awkward with other people as well, and so again, there's this blending. There's these the books exploring the fact that the things we think are strange and alien about life are the similar. There's more in common that we have with real life and these machines than we might first realize. Essentially, which is interesting territory for drama. Interesting territory to think about. And I thought that's one of the reasons why this is one of my favorite robot comics, because I find it to be very thought-provoking. It's using the guise of a romance story between the robot android and the guy to kind of start exploring some of these things. One of the interesting moments right here, she doesn't have a name, and she's talking like a robot, but she looks like a person. He ends up saying, just stay where you are so he can go to work. And she just stands there for like the entire day. When he comes home, he's scared out of his wits because she's just standing exactly where he told her to stand.
It made me think of that the psychotic girlfriend meme.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is that Ada's character, as the story goes, she's the opposite of the psychotic girlfriend. But the fact that she's a
moment
robot,
when he walks through the door,
right.
It's like,
You're talking about the overly attached girlfriend.
Yes,
Overly
that's the
attached,
one.
right.
Yeah.
Fizz, this is called Alex plus
and
Ada.
that's the thing about this whole story is there's no way there's not having an overly attached girlfriend kind of dynamic. She doesn't have a name. Doesn't have a personality. Her whole like impetus, her whole drive is to be whatever is pleasing in any way, right? Like so, like she's programmed. If he wants to have, you know, a live-in servant like Emmy the robot that's just, you know, there to you know, do daily chores, well, that's what she's up for. If she wants to be the weird baby doll sex replicant from Blade Runner, well, she's down for that too, right? Whatever it is that she's just like, oh, I'm here to do whatever you want, just whatever it is. And it's just sort of like there's no way you don't have that sort of. I mean, I don't know how they progress with the story, right? But that's the setup. That's the setup is that you have
the
this
setup is partly
cycle.
that I think, yeah, but there are seeds even in these first two chapters that again make that territory unstable. For example, it's not just a matter of plugging her in. In order to make these robots more acceptable for what they do, they run on human food. Now, the grandmother says you could actually technically feed her cat food, well, but she says, I would never do that. And it's like, well, technically you could, so why wouldn't you? And it's like what's going on here is because of the uncanny, because we're actually in the canny valley at this point. We're actually past uncanny valley. The robot can pass as human. That it's like, well, I would never feed a human cat food, would I? So it becomes very, it becomes much more psychological about what we're exploring. And those are the types of things that I think are very interesting. And so, but no, Reese, you're right in the sense that
it all comes down to
these things are at tension with each other because like his humanity, her like illusion of it at this point in the story. And there's the moment where he says, you know, can you just like stay here? And she stands in that exact position the entire day. And then he's checking like her energy levels, and his buddy at work thinks he's checking out like real human women.
Yeah, like I think he's on like a Tinder or something.
Right. Yeah. So that's basically not a lot happens in the first two issues. The rest of the story, it's about 15 issues, and it goes by pretty fast. I do recommend it. It's not as I don't want to get into spoilers, but it does go into, like I said, it does go into some interesting territory. It's not as like
she does have that overly attached eye, the eyes kind of look.
The eyes,
look at that,
a little, yeah.
Well, yeah, because once again, she's programmed to be servile, right? That's the baseline of the whole deal. So even though like she stood there the whole day, she says, you know, why are you standing there this whole time? Yo, should I have moved? And then she passes out from lack of food, right? But which also, like, I mean, like to say it earlier in the thing that they go through the rules of robotics, and you know, or am I combining stories? I can't remember. Like, reading two stories that are so similar.
I mean,
that particular. Well, I mean, this one and the Emmy, they have, you know, the similar. They talk about that she's like her mental age is supposed to be equivalent of like 24 with a college education, and blah 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 blah, and that's like all in the first part of the thing. And it's so
seven brings up, he says visually it looks like a boring comic. I think the visuals are a weakness, but I would say that the drama and some of the things that are explored, the artwork never dragged it down too much for me. And there are some interesting sci-fi designs to things like what they've put into the world in terms of how they fleshed out how the technology works. And
definitely, like the presence of robots like everywhere, and how they're low key. They're just part of the space. Yeah. They have ergonomic design. They have the kind of design you'd expect from a world where you have robotic waiters that aren't there to look like robots, bringing you your food at the restaurant. That kind of stuff I thought was pretty. I mean, his little personal assistant that gets him coffee is like a flying Roomba and looks like a flying Roomba. So it was
right.
Yeah, yeah. It's that sort of like it's that trend in technology we see now where everything's supposed to be minimalist, and so it's that minimalist vision of the future, which, like I said, it's not extremely dynamic. But again, the way they channel this, like this guy just shows up at the door, and it's like, yeah, it's like your Amazon Prime guy.
Yeah.
With his, the only difference, he's got a robot next to him. But he goes through and reads this whole because Alex is basically trying to return the robot. He hasn't even named it yet. He names her Ada by the end of the issue. Once you name it, like you name naming anything else, he's decided once he gives her the name, I'm keeping you. But like we have our guy here, and he's like, have you damaged her? Have you uploaded any mods? Have you how much porn is on it? Like,
she thinks Colonel Sanders.
Yeah. Regarding the comment about the visuals being boring, there are obviously a lot of computer design, which kind of goes along with this being about robotics. That with so much robot drafting, it gives it a very staid look. And I know that a lot of people doing 3D modding have wrestled with that it kind of looks, but it works with this, given the topic and given the subject matter.
Well, here's a panel that would drive Matt Krotz absolutely crazy right here. Actually, both of these, because you have them where they're the same elements that we've seen in previous panels, the same digital elements, but they're just put a fuzz filter to show you that they're in the background.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, like I said, I do concede. I think that there are elements of the artwork that are not its strength, but like with Hutch, because of its content, it's not as much of a weakness as it would be in another story. The story itself is worth it, in my opinion. And I did enjoy it, and it stuck with me. And thinking about, because one thing about robots that we've been talking about our favorite robot comics, and we need another show to follow up on this. But to talk about what it means to actually be a robot, right? Is it just an aesthetic? Is it just having a character who's made out of metal? Or does it mean that we're dealing with a character who exists in the uncomfortable liminal space between human and inhuman? And what I think is interesting is that many comics, and I'm not faulting them, but one of the issues that I had when I thought about my favorite robot comic is I was like, well, a lot of these robot characters are, they just act like people most of the time. It's a person who's made out of metal. And what I think is interesting to consider if we're going to think about robot comics is some of that uncomfortable liminal space when we go, that thing looks like me, it talks like me, but I know it's not me. And that's something that becomes a pretty important point of contention in Alex and Ada, where it says, I know she may seem real, she's not real. They keep this. The humans feel threatened when the machine becomes so real that it could be just like you or me. There's a distinct threat because, like, for example, the women say, she'll never age. How can I compete in a dating pool if you can just buy your perfect woman? And not only is she, immortal and, and does everything you want, but she's indecipherable. Like, she has her own mind. If she is in fact sentient, then we actually are fully replaced.
Well, and that's one of the things that I found unsettling about this story specifically was that it, in many ways, it's the same metaphysical and moral question behind, porn, right? And the idea that there is a one-way relationship that is being built here, something that is between something that is designed to produce life, and something that is designed to sate need, and that whole concept, that dividing line between the the real and the artificial, the commercial and the biological, the mechanistic and the I can't think of the other thing in my head, but those dichotomies, and the story deals with it, or at least it starts to deal with it. I don't know where it goes with all of that, but it is unsettling that it's dealing with these big questions in ways that I felt weren't weighty enough. But it was also only 2 issues in, so it's a 15-issue series.
Right.
They may well get to some of that stuff.
They do.
But
I don't want to spoil it, but the idea, like, she's not sentient right now, but the beginning of the story talked about robots being sentient. Mm-hmm. So that's the stage is set for exploring.
Even if she stops being sentient, she's not going to stop being a robot. That's the well, that's the contention, at least, of some of the story. And that was, I guess, and maybe they do it better. That was one of the things about, like, Bicentennial Man that rang extremely hollow in that picture. Was it just sort of presumed sentience? And then you have Robin Williams, emoting things that I mean, Robin Williams never seemed completely human. Robin Williams seemed like somebody who was acting completely human.
I gotta say, though, I did appreciate how his acting became more human as he went on. He was clearly learning.
I just think he got better at mocking. I think there was just.
Well, let's stay.
Are you talking about during Centennial Man or his entire career?
I'm talking about his entire career. I'm talking about.
No, seriously, I'm asking. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I mean in Bicentennial Man.
Okay.
In Bicentennial Man, there definitely is pouring that on there. I'm talking about in his entire career. That's why you're looking at Robin Williams as somebody who never really understood being human. So
I'm no expert here, but I don't think Seven likes the artwork.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things about the artwork that I was most irritated with, and it wasn't a big deal, but I hated that there was no change in line weight in the entire book. That was the one thing where I was just like, that's what gives it. It gives it that instructional brochure. When you get on the airplane and it tells you how to buckle your seatbelt, that you never really look at because there's somebody up front who's going to show you how to do it in 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. But there's always in case you weren't paying attention, there's instructions in the little trifold in front of your seat, and that's the artwork that's in it.
Perhaps what it really could have benefited from then is if you really put a lot more effort into that kind of artwork on the human characters, but not the robots.
Right.
That would have been a really clever direction.
I've already conceded that I think the artwork it's weaker. So I have conceded that. I do think that because of the subject material, it doesn't hold it back as much as it would have if it were trying to do something else. So like that's I think where I stand on that. I think that being super dynamic with this at a certain point could actually start detracting.
I think you're definitely looking at a lot of the scenes being blasé, being boring. Even as decompressed as the first issue was, where it was just nothing happened. Nothing happened the first issue. It was, but I mean, that did accentuate the emptiness of Alex's life.
Could I just make a point? When the redhead in the party was coming on to him, she had vitality and her body was like all over the place compared to him standing straight up and down. It's kind of like about how boring he is. Mm-hmm. And if you look at that one part, looked kind of interesting because it's like she came across as the only character who kind of is at an angle and everybody else is straight up and down. And but I thought it was interesting that, and I don't know if that was, I haven't read this far, but
okay, Twitless, do you want to jump us in about 4 or 5 chapters and see if anything's changing?
but I think it's interesting that a woman would be worried about having to compete with a android that can please him in every way, because it's like women are so hard and incomprehensible to understand, but you go through it because of the rewards of being involved with a woman. And if you can have that by just saying, hey, do this, then why would you go through all the agonies of being involved with actual women? And that's the problem. I mean, that's not being flippant. That is the situation.
This may seem weird and futuristic, but the fact is this already exists.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I didn't find it that weird and futuristic.
Yeah. If you go over to Japan, like you can go to a place where some girl will some actress will pretend to be your girlfriend or wife for like the next 8 hours.
It's not even just humans. Like I said, they're developing AI. Like Twitter advertises AI girlfriends now.
Right.
Like
Twitter now? I'd only heard of it as like a thing in Japan too.
No, it's their ads on Twitter. AI girlfriend, and it's literally I'll say I will totally be your most supportive girlfriend, and it's like it's so like this. What this represents in some ways is in its infancy, its nascency, but it's just coming. Like it's already here.
Yeah.
If it's 100 years away, it's coming.
Yeah. Glenn Reynolds was talking about that. Geez, 15 years ago on his blog too. I mean, it's one.
But the point is, maybe it is 100 years away technologically, but it is here right now in practice. People are already getting their fill.
It's the Lucy Lubot episode of Futurama.
Right.
Exactly. Everything man did was because of wanting to attain women, and now you get a Marilyn Monroe bot. Yeah.
Well, and now men aren't doing anything, so I guess that's an appropriate trade-off. So, well, we on that depressing note, let's leave Alex and Ada in the past.
Oh, actually, I had one question.
Okay.
I just realized his name is Alex. Was this before or after Alexa was created?
After.
That is so weird. You'd think they would have named her Alex.
Well, and they also named the service that he has for his brain chip as Prime. So I mean, they were pulling for pop.
Yeah. Like there's definitely a chunk of Amazon in this.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Alexa is after or before this in 2013?
I think so. Maybe I'm wrong. I thought the first
I think Alexa just seems like it's been around forever, but
Alexa was 2013, so it would be actually right before this comic.
Okay.
Right before this comic.
Yeah. So just think, no girls will ever be named Alexa or Siri.
Were girls
You'll never name one.
Before?
Or Google.
Or Google. Thank you for that.
It's not common here, but Siri actually is a common name over in like the India subcontinent.
I was just wondering about it being Indian.
Yeah, but you don't want to name them now. I'm saying from here on out.
Right.
Yeah, because every time you call your kid, you activate your device.
Or you just don't get a spy bot in your house. That's an option people can do too. It's just.
Well, I was thinking about that with her. Like, she could totally be a way for the company to spy on every aspect of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this guy's got a brain implant, so they're already spying on him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, his grandma probably didn't really. I mean, she's probably some sort of Amazon plant. Let's face it.
Yeah, at that point, you might as well go all the way. If once you dip into your brain being wired, you might as well just go all the way with everything else.
Yeah. No need. Yeah.
Speaking of robotic women.
That's the Ghost in the Shell situation.
All right, here we go.
So back
which was another backup was the original Ghost in the Shell manga.
Yeah, definitely one. There's so many robot comics you need to discuss in the future. So
all the other middlemen.
So the last one is Hutch's pick, which is Brave and the Bold
and Platinum.
1-8, I can't remember.
187.
187. There you go.
Yeah. And this was it had been a long time since the Metal Men had been in Brave and the Bold. I think like the previous ones were 130 or something like that. So 5 years, 6 years at least. And the Metal Men were created in the 60s over a weekend, and they needed something to fill an issue of Showcase. The previous contributor dropped out, and Robert Kanigher came up with this story in a weekend. Not this story, but the original Metal Men. And then they appeared for several times, and then they had a series that ran for a long time. And around issue 33, I think, was the last time. If you can scroll down just a little bit, Tin is the short little robot, and he had a girlfriend named Nameless that he built from a kit. It wasn't one of their models; it was just a kit robot that he made that fell in love with him. And it's a weird story for the time, but she hung around with the characters until like issue 33. And that last issue was the one with the guy who built the Metal Men builds the Metal Women and a Platinum Man to be the opposites. And then, this, as is typically the case, all these characters who appear just vanish into a crevice in the earth by the end. In this one, literally, a crevice appears in the earth and all of them fall into it and get incinerated. And it's like, well, that's the end of that. And then the next issue, for no reason, there was no Nameless. The girlfriend of Tin, Nameless, disappeared. So this issue is about Nameless and how Batman finds one of their old enemies, a floating fury, dragging the Iron, one of the Metal Men, into the water. And so he gets involved in this. Just a big coincidence. He just happens to come by and see this happening.
Which was very common Brave and the Bold.
For
the uninitiated, Brave and the Bold was the Batman team-up book in the 70s and 80s.
So this story, Whatever Happened to What's Her Name, is about, if you'll keep scrolling, so he finds one of the old enemies and it damages Iron, and then they find that Tin has been destroyed, and Tin said something about Nameless, and none of the other Metal Men, it doesn't register with them. Like, what's Nameless? They don't know. And if you keep scrolling down, go ahead. So they show up, they get involved with Batman, and they talk about Tin being destroyed, but he says Nameless right before he, stops functioning. And Batman is so moved and outraged that the Metal Men don't seem to recognize Nameless, because he remembers her. Sorry, I forget that there's ads in these comics. So this is before Batman was an a-hole all the time. He actually cares,
It's back when he had a soul, and I'm not sure if I like
it. Well, let's see. We're on page 4, I think, and it recaps the story and how they vanished into the earth. And
remember, guys, also there was a time when every comic was somebody's first comic.
This was my first Metal Men comic, and what a great introduction. I'm getting shown all these characters and told all about their backstories. And so Lead is the third Metal Man taken out.
Well, there's the robot dinosaur, guys.
There's the robot dinosaur that was
robot dinosaur. Shout out.
And yes, this is a very good-looking comic. This is Jim Aparo. And right here on this page, if you scroll up a bit, please, not down, scroll up. This is where Batman just kind of gets mad at them. And he says, how can you not remember her? Are you just capable of being wiped like old tape? And so he's actually like very emotional. It's so weird reading anything written before the 1990s with Batman, because it's like he's a real human who cares about people and has his heart on his sleeve, and robots. And he even says, I care about them. And Alfred says, I don't see how you can get concerned about murder with a robot. And he's like, I don't even see them as robots. And that's just a cool aspect of Batman. Batman's involved in this story, even though it's really a Metal Men comic, and it's summarizing all this stuff. It gives the backstory of how Tin built Nameless as his girlfriend, but then she ended up like loving him anyway, even though he just built her as a kit model. And then she disappeared, and without explanation. And it turns out that after a whole bunch of stuff that goes on, I'll just summarize. The Platinum Man survived. All the other female the metal women disappeared. but the Platinum Man survived, and he fell in love with Nameless. And so he has been behind. Here's the Gas Gang, another old villain. They're doing all this in 17 pages, people. They're bringing back 5 enemies, I think. And so you've got the Gas Gang coming here, and it takes out the remaining Metal Men, and then you can sell grit and make money. And okay, then this is just more backstory. You can just skip past this, but then he brings Doc into it and kind of finds out. And there we finally see the Platinum Man riding one of the Missile Men, another old enemy. So we're getting introduced to like 4 of the old Metal Men enemies and these other characters that never really had a explanation of what happened. And there's Tin taking on the Platinum Man. What's that?
I seriously never knew this universe existed until reading this comic.
And so the Metal Men take on the Missile Men, who are their old enemies, one of the biggest enemies who recur very often. And then Batman finds another old enemy, Bolts, a giant robot named Bolts. And it's just, I don't think it does much. It's just there, just one more old enemy. Oh, he does have to avoid it. And then finally, I love this artwork. It's just great. Then Tin is finally reunited with Nameless, and they decide to get married. So after everything else that has happened, she realizes she loves Tin and not the Platinum Man. And you can scroll down to the bottom there. So then there's a wedding ceremony. Next panel, right after they said, hey, let's get alloyed, basically their version of married. They're married in one panel, and then Batman hears a ticking and realizes the Missile Man is about to explode, and Nameless flies off and blows up.
It's so bizarre because I actually thought
comes out of nowhere.
I thought the story was going to end with the wedding.
Exactly.
Like that's usually where you'd end the story. No, and it's like, no, actually keep reading. Oh no, we got to kill the bride now.
Yeah. You know what? What this ends, basically what it comes down to, I think, is what I'm going to call the Bonanza effect.
Bonanza effect, yeah.
Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
Go back to the normal.
Right, so we can't have the girl get in there. We got to get rid of her at the last possible second.
It's just funny because in this instance, it was so blatant. And it was so I'd want to be mean, but it felt a bit contrived. It was just like, oh no, a bomb.
Yeah.
Like, literally.
Do you think that
the best answer?
You want to get rid of Platinum Man? I mean, he's still there. What did ever happen to him? They did nothing with him.
Do you think that
go ahead.
When the editor suddenly said, no, we can't have the girlfriend in there, and they suddenly had to rush this last minute ending in there?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's possible. I don't know. I don't know why they couldn't have her, because she was in, like I said, about a good year and a half worth of Metal Men. It's like she was there for so long.
It's because she got married. Once she became a Mrs., she had to die.
It changes the character.
Yeah.
So
marriage status is a character trait.
And of course, you can rebuild any of the Metal Men. Why couldn't you rebuild her?
Exactly.
No, she's super dead.
It is. Batman says she's gone, vaporized.
He made her out of a kit. Can't he just make another one?
Well, no, it's like.
But that would be a new person.
It'd be a new person.
We have was it Ship of Theseus or whatever?
Yeah.
On there? Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that was weird reading this was how they kept killing off one character after another, and it's reading like a horror movie, except at the same time, every single one of them's already being rebuilt. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, there we go. It's like Dragon Ball Z, ramped up to 11th.
So this comic, in some ways, has the opposite problem that Alex and Ada had. Whereas Alex and Ada decides to do the decompression, where it's like, hey, I'll take a whole issue to barely introduce things.
Yeah.
This story has some serious pacing problems in terms of like like a mile a minute. It is a roller coaster, but there were a couple of moments where I was like, "Oh gosh, this is too much." Turn the page. We have to kill the person, even though like she's just said I do.
Do you think its entire existence is simply to retcon and explain what happened to her?
I think people have been asking what happened to her because she just disappears with no explanation.
Right.
Yeah. Well, this was, I mean, that happened a lot with Brave and the Bold and with DC Comics Presents, where the editors were pretty involved with the letter writing community, and I think that played into a lot of what stories got picked for those books.
There was a Justice League issue 144, if I recall correctly, that was just to explain why Green Lantern could be a member of the Justice League when his comic was not published until 2 issues after Justice League was formed or something like that. It's like some really picayune point that you would only care about if you were looking at publication dates. But somebody had been nagging them so much that they actually had a whole story to explain it.
That's hilarious.
They do. Sometimes it's like, all right, quit bugging us. Here's the story explaining why.
Well, I mean, and think about how like things have changed, right? So like at Marvel, when you found the continuity error or something like that, they send you out a no prize, right? Good eye, general reader, that whole thing. At DC, they had ongoing conversations with letter writers. And you even got some letter writers that were really prolific that ended up, working for the company, right? That was a whole thing. And like now, like a lot of big name writers, they'll block it fans on Twitter, right? There isn't that kind of, even though people are more accessible now, right. There's not that kind of camaraderie or accessibility around the central point. And that's one of the, I don't know, it's interesting to think about how that's a change.
They're more accessible, and then you find out what jerks they are. That's the problem with being too accessible. There used to be Bob Rozakis running the letters page, kind of running interference. You don't need to read this letter. So, yeah. The thing is, I like, picking up I don't want to get too much into this, but as I think at least a couple of I did try to break into comics back around 2003, 2004, around there, right around the time that all the old writers that I used to like were kind of leaving and the editorial was all changing. And I probably wouldn't have enjoyed if I had gotten to work for DC. I wouldn't have known what to write. But as it was, I actually met Dan DiDio in 2004 at a convention where our comic book debuted. And I was going to show it to him. I did not know that he is a huge Metal Man fan. And I had a pitch for how to save the Metal Men from the bad miniseries they had, which killed off Gold and changed Doc Magnus into a made-up metal called Viridium. It's just not true to the idea of the comic, and it really didn't work. And I had a whole pitch, not for saying, hey, let's just hit the reboot button, but actually it explained why all these weird things happened, and it actually grew the characters. And I didn't pitch it to him because I didn't know that he liked Metal Men. And it turns out he loves Metal Men. He even wrote the Metal Men. And in the comic, it's like he took a lot of the reboots that they've done over the 2000s and the 2010s, and he threw them all out and he put them back to the old design. And he even had a big room, a 2-page spread of just all their old designs laying around, like discarded body parts that they tried and then gone back to this one. And he even has Nameless sitting around deactivated, as Will Magnus has Nameless just like in his office so that he can talk to her like a counselor, but she's not actually listening because she's shut off. But she exists. Her body's there, and it's like it was destroyed completely in this book. It's like, if you have the robot, why don't you just turn it back on? So, and oddly enough, if you read the 12-issue series that he wrote, actually came out, and in the course of that, he was like kicked out of being the guy running DC, and in the last issue, he actually appears as the bartender in the comic book saying, "Well, I just lost my job, so you guys can close up the bar." And he tosses the keys on and leaves the metalman in the bar, and Tin is pushing a dolly and with a drape over it, and they say, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I'm going to see how good I am at creating life," and he pulls it back, and Nameless is under the tarp, and so it's like, it's kind of cool. His series was kind of good, but I hate every other attempt that they've made at the Metal Men. They've done some really horrible stuff, which I scanned a whole bunch of pictures to show you. I'm not going to show them to you, but yeah, it's like Dan DiDio really did kind of like the old stuff, and I kind of wish that, what might have been, if only I had pitched it to him that I was going to get them back to their roots and the way he liked them, I might have been a comic book writer, but I didn't know it at the time.
Well, that's sounds like the only thing DiDio wanted to keep.
Yeah.
the only thing he liked. Everything else was. Anyway, we don't need to talk about
he's the guy who signed off on all the other, he was the publisher during all those other ones, but it's like, then he does it, and it's like, put them back the way Ross Andrew drew them. That's the way they should look.
That's bizarre.
Yeah.
That's strange.
I found an interesting picture here, actually, of Cyborg with the Metal Men.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one this is from. It's
here, I got to change the layout here.
I mean, look at the design on Mercury. It's just hideous. I don't know which one this is from, but
that does seem like an obvious team up that we ought to have seen more of.
Yeah.
Also, I've never been. I understand like the pull to have a superhero logo on the chest, but I've never understood Cyborg with the chest logo. Is that just me?
Like,
honestly, I didn't notice until now.
Looking at him, he's Cyborg because he's Cyborg. Yeah. You don't need a logo or anything there.
That is true.
That's kind of my feeling on it.
Is it that they're trying to pull from Iron Man and give him kind of energy?
No, I think they just. I think they're trying to lean into the superhero-ness of the thing and build the design that way. But I don't know. It just feels out of place to me. I think it's branding. I think that's what they were going for.
Yeah. He already has something up here.
So, anyhow. So, well, guys, I think we were trying to cut short and we didn't.
No.
So, I think that's probably a show, though. Thanks. Do you have anything you want to close with? What do you want to do?
Read Omega Girl. I have robots in it.
Oh yeah, there you go.
I was gonna say you should have had Hubris Brought as your avatar.
Ooh,
oh yeah,
that would have been fun. Hubris Brought is awesome.
Could I just mention my new project?
Yeah, absolutely.
I am streaming every day 2 to 4 on YouTube as the username You Lousy Kids. So I'm streaming. I'm just playing the new Zelda game, and I've been playing nonstop. And tomorrow's the first day I'm not doing it because it's my wife's birthday, and there's a reason we've been married for 24 years. I know when to say, okay, I'm not going to play the game today. So tomorrow I won't, but I have been doing it every day. So we'll see. Sometimes it's technically very bad. Sometimes it's great. You all know how I have technical problems sometimes, but so that's what I've been doing. And you can mention your project. Sorry. Thanks.
No, thanks for telling us. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to make sure people get a chance to shout out what they're up to. I know Twitless is working on of course the Super School. You guys are still doing that, you and Cartoonifus.
Yep.
And so make sure to check that out. There are fun robots in there. Force of Good and Evil is ongoing. I know that I'm not sure when our next new page is coming out, but I have been working on uploading the manga versions of the pages onto Global Comics as we work on those. Got some other projects we're working out. Metal, what have you been up to?
Packing, but so everything's been kind of pushed back. Eventually, we'll get back to X Dynamis Chaos and also get into production on that magazine. I'm going to make part of it. But if you want to see something robot related, I guess X Dynamis Chaos kind of stalled in the middle of a fight where the metal is fighting a mercenary piloting an intentionally really stupid looking mech. So
that's amazing. That's amazing. So, awesome. Okay, I feel like I should have something more to say, but I don't. So we're just gonna call it. And until next time, guys, keep reading comics. Go find
robots.
some about
Does
comics
not
about robots.
compute.
Go read some Alita Battle Angel. Okay, hey guys.
Bye.
Bye.